Hello, greetings. How's everyone? Welcome to Spiritual Warriorship Seminar. And we're reading from books by His Holiness Bhakti-tirtha Swami Maharaj. And I'm hopeful some of you have been here before and are working on your spiritual warriorship. Hopefully you may have a little anecdote to share in the chat room, or give me some idea, or others, not just me, others who may be there, some idea of how these teachings and instructions and techniques and technologies presented here by His Holiness Bhakti-tirtha Swami may have helped you or is helping you, because it's about change. It sounds familiar, doesn't it? But it's change of consciousness we're working on. I found something of his I want to share before we get into tonight. It's from Spiritual Warrior 2. And he says, God has no favorites. Everyone has the same chance to become natural, to attain realization, and to experience divine love. Everyone has the opportunity for that and the same chance. It's just a matter of our desire to attain these states. And that's a wonderful statement, because hopefully it makes us stop and think and even meditate on what is our desire, what are our desires. Are we really interested in diving into our spiritual life, or just interested in spiritual life in general? And you have a chance to attain those realizations and to experience divine love. He says, as the scriptures remind us, the essential point is to love God with our hearts and to fully surrender. How do we attain a state of surrender that seems so remote from our current situation? But he states several steps are available. First of all, we must become more willing to abide by the laws of the spiritual world. We must also associate with spiritual people who can guide us and remind us of our commitments. And finally, we must not allow anything or anyone, including our mind, to impede our progress toward the goal of loving and serving God. And I feel that since we started this program with the 12 qualities of a spiritual warrior, and we went into what is love, what is lust, we've been given many, as I said before, tools and techniques, technologies to help us move ahead. So hopefully we're moving towards some real God realization. And again, I ask, if you've had any experience of change in your consciousness, just let us know. Before I go into tonight, I want to say I missed you for 2 weeks. I was away. But I went to a wonderful festival in honor of His Holiness Bhakti-tirtha Swami in Cleveland, Ohio. That was my first stop. And there we were celebrating and acknowledging him and glorifying him and talking about how he helped us in our lives, how his teachings in these spiritual warrior books, the beggar books, helped us. And those of us who were fortunate enough to be with him while in his physical body, how he helped us and encouraged us to move ahead spiritually. It was wonderful reviewing, reiterating the wonderful pastimes we had with him. And on the last day of the festival, on the Sunday, we took a bus tour of the places, because he's originally from Cleveland, Ohio. And as I suggested, if you haven't gotten his biography, please try to get it at Krishna.com. And by the way, all the Spiritual Warrior books you can purchase at Krishna.com store. But on the Sunday, we took a bus tour, and we stopped at the hospital where he was born, the elementary school he went to, the church he was first baptized in, and where he did evangelistic preaching. And we went to the land where his home that he grew up in as a child, it had burned down, but it was still, it was pointed out to us where it was. And we went by his high school. So it was a wonderful day of reminiscing and realizing the importance of the personality that we had in our lives and the wonderful growth, spiritual growth techniques and technologies that he's given us. And they work if we put them in practice, if we imbibe them as we hear them and endeavor to bring change. Because as I just read, God has no favorite. If you have the desire for this change in higher consciousness, he is going to take care of you. And if you have the desire that you're really not interested in God now, he also helps you with that. That's how loving he is. And from the festival in Cleveland, Ohio, I then went to Gita Nagari in Port Royal, Pennsylvania, which is a farm, and where I lived in the ashram there for 5 years, and is where the Institute House, as we call it, is where Bhakti Tirtha Swami left his body. He was there for a number of weeks until the end, and then a samadhi is there that reminds us of his presence there. And the devotees, the few devotees that are there, it was so nice reconnecting. So as we even said here, that we must associate with spiritual people. And there's such a lovely energy of exchange when we do that. So that was my travel. And I'm thankful the Lord is merciful enough and allowed me to come back to face you and hopefully give you a few more things, techniques, technologies to think about and to have that God realization that we talked about and eventually experience the divine love of the Lord. He tells us, and we're working now from Spiritual Warrior 4, Conquering the Enemies of the Mind. He says if you take these teachings seriously, they can transform your life into a most sublime, loving adventure. Doesn't that sound exciting? Isn't that what we're all looking for? So hopefully those who are regular visitors will have begun practicing and experiencing. And anybody that's new, just listen, because wherever we pick up in his books, there's some test technology tool for us to grow spiritually. So I'm going to start tonight, as I do sometime, and I'm going to do tonight, with a review. We finished last week chapter 1 in this particular Spiritual Warrior book, with the title of the chapter, Avoiding Excessive Anxiety. Oh, what do you say? Is that possible? He gives us techniques and technologies to be mindful in how. So I'm going to review and maybe stop at certain sections to see if you have any questions, and we can move along. So he opens this chapter, Avoiding Excessive Anxiety, with a reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, Chapter 13, which states, The false ego of the living entity places him in bondage and awards him exactly the opposite of what he really desires. Therefore, an intelligent person should give up his constant anxiety to enjoy material life and remain situated in the Lord, who is beyond the functions of material consciousness. The next section is called Do Not Fear. And I'm going to now, with this review, take excerpts out, because when we went through this, we read page by page. He says, accepting the Lord to be our real well-wisher, our great friend, and our ultimate protector is very profound and is the essence of spiritual life. If we could just accept these facts, our worries would not have a substantial foundation to grow. Did you get that? Accepting the Lord to be our real well-wisher, our great friend, always there for us, and our ultimate protector is very profound, but it is the essence of spiritual life. He goes on, anxiety actually inhibits the positive development of love and devotion. Anxiety and fear are attributes that cannot directly coincide with love and devotion. Get that? Anxiety and fear. And so many of us walk with fear. But he's saying anxiety and fear are attributes that cannot directly coincide with love and devotion. Fear and love go ill together. All activities can fit into one or two categories: kama, lust, and prema, love. Therefore, a devotional spiritualist needs to become doubtless and fearless. How does a devotee on the spiritual journey acquire these qualities, and what interferes with their development? He hopes to answer those questions in this particular chapter. And he says the true spiritual warrior can never be captured by excessive anxiety because of his or her constant absorption in giving and receiving love. Remember, we read the School of Love. The soul is made for love. We are eternal beings. And if the soul is made for love, then we're definitely giving and receiving love. The next section, anxiety minimizes the Lord's supremacy. He states, anxiety minimizes our access to the Lord's constant help and guidance from generation to generation and age to age. Worrying literally minimizes our access to the potency of God in his different incarnations, who come to annihilate the miscreants establish pure devotional service, and protect his devotees. There's that word, protect again. God comes to protect us as we give love and offer to serve him. And as he said, you can't be worrying and be loving at the same time. They go ill together. The Lord tells us to give up such anxiety. And he also tells us that we should engage the mind in positive activities. This is another instruction of the Lord from the Bhagavad Gita 9:34. The Lord instructs, engage your mind. And remember, this book is what? Conquering the enemies of the mind. And if you were with me with the 12 qualities of a spiritual warrior, remember the first one is mastery of the mind. We must master that mind. And we do that by engaging it in positive activities and positive thoughts. So this is the instruction given by the Lord. Engage your mind always in thinking of me. Become my devotee. Offer obeisances to me and worship me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. Now, how do we go about this? What we're trying to do here? The next section is called introspection. He states, we should use this opportunity to look at our mind in order to harass it and place it more in the service of the Lord. If you just stop for 3 seconds and pay attention to what your mind is doing. Let's try that. Watch your mind. Go to your mind. Watch it. Okay, 3. How many things went through your mind? How many were positive? How many were negative? Mastering that mind means to be mindful, thoughtful, aware of what's going through. First, he says, we should look at ourselves to determine the extent that excessive worry permeates our lives. How much time do you spend worrying and being anxious? This examination will tell us about our level of faith. He says a sadhu or saintly person is supposed to be dridha vrata, or faithful. Faithful with firm determination and very grave and focused. What does this tell us about our own mindset? Be aware. Be aware. Watch it. Every day, anytime. Where is my mind going? Where am I letting my mind go? Because you can master it and bring it back to a positive format. And if you just take a line from one of these scriptures that I'm reading, you can keep repeating that and let the mind become absorbed in that. By engaging in deep inspiration, many people will discover that worries and anxieties thoroughly permeate their day-to-day activities. Now, such worries often revolve around physical and economic problems. Right? We can understand that. Or stem from all types of insignificant matters. He's going to offer 4 different categories with which to broaden the analysis. And he's going to define worry. The first area is called, what is anxiety? And here's how he defines. Okay? Got a paper and pen? May need to write it down so you can go back and look at it and check it in case that anxiety or worry tries to grab a hold of you. Because right now you're in the process of eliminating to some degree, if you are one that worries constantly and are constantly anxious. He states, worry is a choice that is often a way to avoid change. We sometimes take shelter of worry because it helps us feel busy and allows us to rationalize our lack of concrete action. Instead of taking the proper action, we accept the illusion of activity that anxiety produces. Worry is also a poor substitute for proper loving action. It is an artificial activity that we use to minimize the proper and beneficial action. As a result, we just worry. Since we spend so much time worrying, we have less time to actively glorify the Lord. If we place all our mental and physical energy into worrying, we will not have a sufficient amount left to repose in God. You see, he keeps bringing us back to the important aspect of our lives as spiritual warriors, spiritual people, spiritual beings. And as a spiritual being, there's a connection with God. But if you spend your time worrying and overly anxious in things that have nothing to do with your connection with God, your God relationship, it's a waste of time. Next, excessive worry basically deals with a feeling of powerlessness. Sadhus or saints should not be arrogant or egocentric, but very humble. Although they recognize their own lack of power, they understand that the Lord has the ability to accomplish all tasks. Did you hear that? They understand that the Lord has the ability to accomplish all tasks. Consequently, by letting the power of Shakti of the Lord work through them, they have access to great power. Actually, excessive anxiety disempowers us. Excessive anxiety disempowers us and prevents us from allowing God's power to work through us. Because we have blocked it with the anxiety rather than opening to receive. 4, worrying is a way to rehearse dreadful outcomes. I can kind of relate to that sometimes. You know, you go through, you're planning something. I even sometimes with giving a class, what if? What if somebody asks this question? What if this happens? You know. So we have to, and this again, being mindful and aware of what's going on. So worrying is a way to rehearse dreadful outcomes you don't want to happen. In other words, he says, it creates some of the same effects or feelings that would result from the negative outcome itself. If we analyze the results closely, worry leads to the exact outcome that we most want to avoid. Since you have practically lived the drama or misfortune in your mind, it hasn't happened, but you're living it in your mind, you may even experience some of the negative effects. Because what does the mind do? Mind accepts and rejects. And what it keeps getting and feeding it, it's there. And it's going to get all the parts together and have it happen. And you say, I knew that would happen. Why? Because you set it up. If you continue to meditate on this mantra, not only will you mentally experience the situation, you may even turn it into a physical experience. And we know there's been research done and books written about how the mind, what goes on in the mind, can bring about some physical ailment. And number 5, abandoning worry does not mean we stop planning. We should not give up our concern when we see an improper action. Rather, we should plan, think powerfully, and then do the necessary. What do you do if you discover a fire in your house? You immediately leave. You should not just sit on the couch and worry. You wouldn't, would you? Obviously, there is a problem, but it is also time for practical action. Now, those are 5 points he brought out in defining worry in this way. Are there any questions or comments on this area we read? Mm-hmm. Are there any people out there? Yeah. Okay, Haribo. Okay, the next section, no questions. Okay. Maybe they're all worry-free and anxiety-free out there and just loving spiritual warriors. But just in case there's someone with some anxiety, the next section is called How to Avoid Anxiety. He asked the question, how do we break this pattern of constantly worrying? How can people who have the protection of the greatest shelter still worry so much? Although we can endlessly worry and consider ourselves to be at the mercy of circumstances, we understand the influence of karma, which refers to any material action that brings a reaction, binding us to this material world. We also understand that higher authorities, the angelic hosts, and the Supreme Lord have control over all things. To the extent that we genuinely surrender, Krishna has the duty to protect and fulfill his part. Considering these factors that I just read, where does all the worry stem from? Does it mean that we think of the Lord as a liar or cheater who wants to see us in constant fear and to use us in unhealthy ways in his position as an autocrat? Does it mean that we only think of God as the controller who wants to keep us in a material prison? If we consider the sweetness of the divine couple or Mother, Father, God, and we consider how the Lord monitors every action and thought, the Lord monitors every action and thought, our level of anxiety should never escalate to such an extent that we do not feel backed up or protected when we act righteously. So let's look at the number of things that he helps us to get out of this anxiety, how to avoid it. Number one, do not fear the future. Do not fear the future. We should try to avoid any worry that revolves around fears of the future. Why is that? Because we really don't have any control. How we do have control, though, to some degree, is what we just finished stating, that if you're worrying, you're really rehearsing for a dreadful outcome. And as we said here, the mind can set that up for you and you're going to have the experience. And if you realize that and have that and accept this as a fact, then you will monitor your worrying and anxiety. He says, as we live each day, we should simply do our very best today and let the future take care of itself. And if we're doing our very best today, the future will, and what's the future? When we get there, we will see results of that very best action. When we worry too excessively about the future, we often fail to take the necessary actions that will lead to an auspicious future. In many ways, the future is an extension of the present, along with influences of the past. Because the mind can bring up stuff, if you will, from the past. And the present moment, are we doing our very best, or are we reacting to what the mind is bringing up? He says, unfortunately, we can turn into our own greatest enemy. Our own mind can create the exact situations that we wish to avoid. And an unhealthy mental culture often blocks the divine power that can work through us. When we worry about the future, we do not offer our best today. Any comments or questions on that one? Do not fear the future. No comments, no questions. Number 2, plan for the worst, and expect the best. These, as I said, he's giving us steps to avoid anxiety. When we encounter worry, we should ask ourselves, what is the worst that could possibly happen? People sometimes say, plan for the worst but expect the best. If we develop this mindset, a setback will not cause such a drastic imbalance because of our backup plan. Therefore, We will have a chance to act positively while recognizing God's position as the ultimate controller. God's the controller. We're not. We can grasp that. By mentally preparing ourselves for the worst, we can calmly improve on a seemingly negative situation, since we have already agreed to mentally accept the circumstances. Any comments or questions on that? How to avoid anxiety? Okay, there's still people on there. Are they talking? Are they listening to me or talking to each other? Okay. Must be some worry-free folks out there. I'm trying to imbibe all of this because I have a tendency sometimes towards worry and anxiety. I'm getting a little bit better. The next term given to avoid anxieties: remember the consequences, he says. As we endeavor to avoid worry, we should remind ourselves of the dangers of excessive anxiety in the terms of its effects on our body and mind. You've known people, I'm sure, who constantly worry. What do they have? They have a nervous breakdown. And a lot of times that's coming from excessive worry and anxiety about what's going to happen that hasn't happened yet. Some of these consequences include poor relationships, hypertension, depression, physical sickness, boredom, lack of creativity, and a lack of productive activity. The list goes on and on. If we look at the downside and understand the amount of loss that results from anxiety, we may even decide to be gainers instead of losers. Any comments or questions on that? Number 4, collect the facts, then act. That sounds quite practical, doesn't it? We should get all the facts. People often try to make decisions before they have a sufficient amount of information about the problem or issue. This lack of knowledge will definitely result in anxiety. We should look at the entire issue and then develop a plan. Makes sense, doesn't it? A situation arises, and this comes from gaining knowledge and understanding through techniques, technologies, through the scriptures, and through sadhus. You can again catch yourself that you're about to go into worry and anxiety, and say, let's look at all the facts of this situation. Gain as much knowledge about it. We should look at the entire issue and then develop a plan. If you're working methodically like that, you don't react harshly. You begin to develop a plan of action. We should not avoid problems. Instead, we must recognize the need to work through them in ways that can help us accelerate in our God consciousness. And here is an important point: to accelerate in God consciousness, to be aware and knowledgeable, as he said here, that God is the controller. Earlier we mentioned to know that God is our very dear friend, that he is our protector, These are the things he's giving us, and we mustn't let them go past us. Because as we imbibe this and understand this, that the Lord is our real well-wisher, and we're having this, then when issues, circumstances arise, we're going to see it, we're going to feel it, but we're going to have a sense of, let's look at this in a very clear way. Let's get the facts on this. Let's look at the whole problem rather than react like, like a madman, madwoman. And that's because we'll know that we're on a spiritual path, and on that spiritual path, the Lord is there to protect us, and as he said earlier, back us up. That's your God consciousness, your Krishna consciousness, your understanding of who you are and who you're connected with. He says, when we find ourselves absorbed in worry, we should take the time to reflect on the actual variables involved in the issue, because this might help us develop a clearer insight and find a more positive way to respond to the situation. At the very least, we should clearly understand the reasons for our anxiety. You see where he says we should take time to reflect on the actual variables. Sometimes spiritualists may struggle in their spiritual lives without even understanding the cause or the problem. If you ask them, what is the problem? They may simply respond, I'm not happy. I feel anxious and agitated. Then you might ask, well, what do you want to do? What is the issue? And this is a good point of, he said earlier that if we're associating with spiritual people, and way back in Mastery of the Mind, he also mentions the importance of associating with people of like mind who are wanting God consciousness, self-realization. You can exchange in this way, and one can, if we forget for a moment, which can happen if something, in an instant, we can almost forget that we are spiritual warriors and we're dealing in the level of consciousness, and we can use love and practical ways given us. But if one is there to remind us to stop, to reflect, and to look, often they might reply, I don't know. I just know that I do not want this service, but I don't know what I do want. Such a person may not have properly examined their own consciousness to discover the root cause of their dissatisfaction. Again, we had a whole section on introspection. We have to look at ourselves. We have to examine our own consciousness. We must look at our long and short-term goals to gain more clarity in our lives. Stop, look, and introspect. Where do you want to go? What do you want to do? What would you like to do? What would you like the outcome to be? Such introspection will help us take more responsibility for our own circumstances and appreciate God's arrangements and tests in our lives. Remember when we were in, I think, Spiritual Warrior 2, we talked about challenges and tests. And he reminds us, Bhakti Tirtha Swami reminds, each test or challenge is an opportunity to do introspection, to look within ourselves, and to take responsibility for what's going on, and appreciates God's arrangements. That means you have a sense of God consciousness and your connectedness with God, and feel He's arranging that to help you continue to grow, to be that strong spiritual warrior, to help others, to give love to others, and to gain in faith that God is always there for you as your protector, well-wisher. After carefully weighing all the facts, we can make more rational decisions. Although we might still make a poor decision, in spite of having a plan, the clarity of vision will help us to fix the mistake or improve on the poor decision. However, if a cloud of anxiety covers our vision, we will continuously add to the cloud until it smothers or suffocates us. This one is good. Next line here. Once we have made a decision, say you follow these, and you've reached a decision, we should act, then beg for mercy and guidance. Dear Lord, I've made this decision, I'm taking this action, please guide me. Please give me your mercy and guide and direct me as I go forth with this. We have to act without being excessively attached to the outcome. There is always the element of risk in spiritual life. For this reason, Krishna told Arjuna, and this is from Bhagavad Gita 1863, thus I have explained to you knowledge still more confidential. Deliberate on this fully, then do what you wish to do. Now, here, after hearing all the necessary instructions, Arjuna then has the duty to act responsibly. This is the nature of free will. However, our actions should not be foolishly based on mere sentiment or unhealthy passion, but we should act according to the Siddhanta, the ultimate goal. We should do the necessary according to the saints, the scriptures, and the spiritual teachers. After considering the situation according to these authorities, we must make decisions. Sometimes anxiety results from a lack of decisiveness. Through a proper evaluation, we will be able to make decisions, or at least take responsibility for our actions. And this way you don't go into the blame game. We're going to have a section later about blame and coulda, shoulda, and all of those things. We won't be giving blame because we will know that we have taken the time to introspect and make a plan and take an action, make a decision. And as he says, even if it's a poor decision, you can take responsibility for that and know that you'll have another opportunity. When we feel tempted to worry about a problem, we should first carefully ask the following questions. Ready? You know it already because we read this last week. Oh, I wish I could just look at you and you could tell me what you remember. But since we can't do that, I'll give it to you again. When you feel tempted to worry about a problem, you can ask yourself these questions. 1. What is the actual problem? 2. What is the cause of the problem? 3. What are the possible solutions? And 4. What is the best solution that we can try to attain? And we'll just go through the next points of how to avoid anxiety. The next is keep the mind busy. Keeping the mind busy is a valuable technique. What's that about the mind being the what? Somebody's workshop? What mind?
An idle mind.
An idle mind is the devil's workshop. Plenty of action is one of the best therapies or cures for the worrying mind. Many times we get absorbed in our anxieties because we do not have anything productive in which to engage our minds and bodies. You hear that? Many times we get absorbed in our anxieties because we do not have anything productive in which to engage our minds and bodies. All that loose energy needs to go somewhere. Therefore, a simple technique is to look at our use of time. When we are engaged in a healthy way, we will not be subject to such excessive amounts of anxiety. Does this remind you of one of the qualities of a spiritual warrior? That says, no idle time. The next one, to avoid anxiety. Avoid trifles. That's it. We should carefully avoid worrying about the trifles that can ruin our happiness and faith in God, the spiritual master and the saints. Sometimes we have to be practical by trying to understand the probability of our worst fears actually happening. What are the chances that I will actually fall down and break my leg? It definitely happens, but what are the chances? The next, help and serve others. Just reading that one phrase, that can really keep your mind busy and active and not indulging in trifles if you're helping and serving other people. And there's always someone who needs help. And even, he goes on, an even greater way to avoid anxiety involves utilizing that energy we just spoke of to think of ways to help another person. We can put so much of our energy into finding ways to serve or assist someone else. And this isn't what comes to my mind. And he may go into this later, but living here in this apartment myself and being in the elderly category, there are times, I could use help. Maybe to pick up something or to move something that's too heavy. If you live in an environment or nearby and you know of an older person, knock on the door and ask, do you need any help today? This can be greatly appreciated. Some days when my legs are really in pain, I'm not able to get to the mailbox. If I could see my little neighbor next door, I would call out, could you check for my mail? But we can take this on ourselves. Or if we see a mother struggling with a child and a bag of groceries, you can offer, may I help you? I'll carry the groceries for you. Or the child may be screaming because the child wants to be picked up also. There's so many ways in our everyday life. But I'm reflecting on myself in that looking for help, more full-time help. He says here, we can put so much of our energy into finding ways to serve or assist someone else. That means you take your mind off yourself and you put it on someone else. There will always be another person whose problems far exceed your own. If we can relinquish some of our selfishness by trying to help another person in distress, we will not waste unnecessary energy in creating the exact problem that we want to avoid. By thinking about another person, we will naturally take our focus away from our own appetite and concerns. And this will actually cause us to become more powerful. If we think too much about ourselves, we actually become powerless. We do. Why? Because we block God from coming through. As our selfishness increases, we will correspondingly lose our power in spiritual life because we will check God's real spiritual power from coming through in our lives. You understand? Think less of yourself and worrying about yourself and help others. And then you are opening yourself for God's spiritual power to come through you. We will prevent the miracles that can occur when we remove our mental and physical disturbances and embrace divinity. Expect a miracle. Teacher Bhakti would always say, expect a Krishna miracle. And I think the last, number 8, he says, understand the influence of karma. You know that karma, what goes around comes around, or cause and effect. As we try to break this habit, sometimes we must recognize that a problem is beyond our control and we will have to deal with it as it is. A certain issue in our lives may just be a part of our karma. Some people do not have the karma to make much money in this lifetime. Other people can make simple investments and that will automatically turn into large quantities of money due to their karma. So what do you say? Oh, that's my problem. It's my karma. Huh? One person can eat a regular diet and exercise, but cannot seem to make any improvement on their health. If it is a part of a person's karma to die at that time, he or she might even slip on a banana peel and die in spite of all other endeavors to obtain good health. Considering the karma factor, we can try to change a situation if possible. Otherwise, We may just have to accept our circumstances and let go of worry. And number 9, this one I think is really fantastic. Establish a worry time. Finally, he says we need to place boundaries to avoid an excessive amount of anxiety. We may want to have a worry hour or time so that the worry, which may be such an integral part of us, can receive attention at a specific time. Like a spoiled child, right? You know that child. You're going to stop and give it some attention, and maybe it'll quiet down running around. We can set aside 1 hour to worry about a problem and then move into another space after the allotted time period. Isn't this wonderful? Then the problem does not need to occupy our entire day, but can be dealt with at a specific time. Furthermore, we want to constantly learn from the past while looking forward to the future. Sometimes a worry deals solely with a problem or unfortunate situation from the past, but we do not want to remain in the past. So I'm going to stop there for tonight. I think that review of what we covered last week can be very helpful. And hopefully some of you are getting these books so you can go in depth into these techniques and technologies so that your life will be transformed. Any questions, any comments?
There's a question from Bhuvan Mohan. He asks, please, for some specific verses of scripture to meditate upon to create a healthy, worry-free mindset. He's asking for, any specific verses from scripture to meditate upon to create a healthy, worry-free mindset.
Okay. Thank you. Yes. To meditate on. Here's one. It's from Bhagavad Gita 12:15. But before that, Bhakti Tirtha Swami says, anxiety is a major symptom of the material disease. If we deny God's existence or deny his position as the supreme controller, we then push him out of the way along with his love and empowerment. And if you've been listening, God as the controller has come up many times, and his power and empowerment. We will even block the flow of blessings coming from the previous acharyas. And this is a purport from Bhagavad Gita 12:15. A few of the devotee qualifications are further being described. No one is put into difficulty, anxiety, fearfulness, or dissatisfaction by such a devotee. Such a devotee is kind to everyone. He does not act in such a way as to put others into anxiety. At the same time, if others try to put a devotee into anxiety, he is not disturbed. It is by the grace of the Lord that he is so practiced that he's not disturbed by any outward disturbance. Actually, because a devotee is always engrossed in Krishna consciousness, God consciousness, and engaged in devotional service, such material circumstances cannot move him. And there's a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. There are a number of verses Purport. Okay. Purport. Here's one from, and something to meditate on. Chaitanya Charamrita Madhya Lila. Unless the living entity comes to the guaranteed protection of the Supreme Lord, he is full of anxiety. This life of material anxiety is called material existence. To be completely satisfied and devoid of anxiety, one must come to the position of eternally rendering service to the Lord. Those are Srila Prabhupada's purports from the different scriptures. And it's what to meditate on. I like the one that Bhakti Tirtha Swami gave us earlier. Do I remember it? Okay. The Lord tells us to give up anxiety, also tells us that we should engage the mind in positive activities. Bhagavad Gita 9:34. Engage your mind always in thinking of me. Become my devotee. And that means become one who wants to serve me or is serving me. Offer obeisances to me and worship me. And if you know you have a connection with God, just saying thank you, Lord, when something is happening in your life. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. And if that's our desire to connect with the Lord, these steps that he's given us in this verse from Bhagavad Gita is a very good one to meditate on. I hope that answers your question.
Bhuvan Mohan says thank you. And Manjesh asks, so what would you recommend we keep our mind busy for?
For not being anxious, for not worrying excessively, for not wasting time in worry and anxiety. What did he ask? And what do we use our minds for? For seeing how to help others. You use your mind in studying sastras, scriptures, prayers, chanting, hearing about the Lord, because this is all about your spiritual life. What's his name?
Manjesh is from Canada.
Oh, that's, say the name?
Manjesh.
Oh, that's a different name. Canada. I think you've been there before.
Yeah.
Welcome. Thank you for being there. Thank you for your question. Did that answer help you?
Yeah.
He's nodding his head.
He smiles and says Haribo.
Haribo. Did that answer help you?
Yes, that does.
I thank you. Thank you for your question. And if you're hearing these technologies and instructions, just keep meditating on them. I hope you're making notes of points that attract you and attract your mind and your spirit. Thank you for your question. Anybody else? Any other? No? Okay.
He says, thank you for such a great class. And others say thank you also.
Oh, thank you for being there. Wish I could see you face to face, but as I even read here, I cannot be anxious or worry about the results. And as he's also said, and I realize I'm trying to live by this, I'm doing my very best and praying the mercy of the Lord. You'll hear and be able to use these points and instructions in your daily life and become powerful spiritual warriors. Thank you for being with us this evening. Hare Krishna.